we are responsible for the outputs of those programs. If the regulator rings me up and says, that Anna Frazzetto lady, you lent her $3 billion unsecured, she's gone, you don't look like you're going to get that money back. Saying that the AI told me to do that is not going to be an acceptable answer to any regulator, right? I love the phrase that Microsoft came up with where they started calling this a co-pilot. It's not the person landing a plane, it's the ancillary tools that help that person to do their job better.
Welcome to AI to Z. Hosted by Airswift's Chief Revenue Officer, Anna Frazzetto, we delve into artificial intelligence, health tech, and more. Tune in and journey with us into the future.
Hello, Richard, and welcome to the podcast. I'm so thrilled to have you here today. Let me introduce you to the audience. So, Richard is a business technology, digital transformation leader, and one of the things that I truly enjoy is you're an advocate for workplace equity for all, and also, not to mention, 2023 Women in IT Asia Male Ally of the Year. You worked as a global leader in a major multinational bank, leading large, diverse international teams to drive service quality, innovation, productivity improvements. And not to mention that in your career, you've not only worked in major organizations, but you've been an entrepreneur, you've built companies, you've been a founder, you've gone through the full cycles of growth, including the fundraising phase and much, much more. So thank you so much, Richard, for being here today.
Thank you, Anna. It's a pleasure as always. And you're giving away a bit of my age there, mate. It's this boyish visage hides a lot more years than anyway. Thanks. So, but good to see you again. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. Well, that I really don't want to date us, but we've known each other probably for more years than we care to admit.
Over a decade. I was thinking about it today. It's over a decade I've known you.
Exactly. Yeah. So Richard, why don't we just jump right in? I know that you've been involved in AI and language foundation models for years, right? So looking at GPT-4, for example, it can solve more complex problems with greater accuracy. So how do you encapsulate that and apply it to the financial industry?
Oh, look, that's a $64 billion question, right? And certainly, it's a big topic that just about every organisation in financial services and all the partners and companies that work with us are racing towards very, very quickly with a lot of energy and a lot of resources. And I think it's where to start. I think probably the very first place to start is that despite the way it may look, given the sort of very rapid ascendancy of the new large language models, and in particular GPT, in the first quarter of this year, it looked like it sort of came from nowhere for many people. But in fact, it is something that we've been working on for quite a long time. The technology we have today, the large language models and the generative AI models we have, are an evolution from what started off as good old-fashioned data and analytics. It has its roots very firmly in the foundations of machine learning and early iterations of what we call AI. Which was really about trying to use technology to help us identify patterns in data and to use those patterns to help us improve or inform the things that we were working on. And so, and in our case, in HSBC, we've been doing this for a couple of decades or more. Looking at and banks are obviously very data rich. We capture lots of information about transactions and investments and assets and liabilities and financial data and all of that. And so for a long time, we've had some very, very smart people thinking about how to get more out of data. Now, what of course has happened is that the scope of the application of this technology has moved beyond those sort of pure transactional data, numerical data sets, and now we're crossing over into any data set. and it's we're using it to apply this technology across text, across images, across audio, across anything that we can digitize, anything that we can store in a computer file. These technologies are now able to process and to infer answers from, which is really what these things do. And so, I guess what this sort of latest explosion, this latest milestone in technology is doing for us is it's allowing us to think creatively about, well, how are we going to use this technology ultimately to deliver value to our customers? I mean, ultimately, it's really making sure we're doing the best we can for our customers and we're delivering good products and good value and good fit to them, and then also to our colleagues who face off to those customers and the colleagues who support them, and so it goes. So a lot of it has really created an opportunity for us to think about that whole customer journey, right from identifying what you as a customer may need, what you as a customer are asking for, what you as a customer might have fit as a new idea or a new suggestion, then working at how we can use this technology to make it fit better to your requirements, make the process of how we provision that product or service to you in as streamlined a way as possible. So lots of big brains thinking about lots of big ideas about lots of opportunities. But certainly, when I talk to my colleagues and peers in the bank, we're most excited about how we can use it to augment and add value to the customers and to the people who work with them.
And Richard, you really hit a couple of, key points. The fact that it all comes down to the data, right? And having the right data analysis that translates into the user experience and really giving you that competitive advantage where the user experience at HSBC is better than another financial institute. What are some of the inherent risks and how do you prepare for it? Because there is a lot of concern around utilizing tools like AI to be able to, have that exposure within your company.
Yeah, look, it's, I think we've gone past that sort of initial gold rush type mentality where a lot of raw enthusiasm and ambition for the technology, certainly in the first half of the year, is now settling down into a more pragmatic, considered, thought about exactly the challenges that you're talking about. Because one of the things that we've already seen, particularly in the use of the public models, is that the output of these engines is only as good as the data that goes in. And if there is bias in your data, and if there is fault in your data, then inherently there will be bias or fault in the answers that come back to you. And I mean, we all saw, when the OpenAI ChatGPT models were first made public, it had only been trained on internet data up until I think it was September 21. So if you asked it a question about anything that happened after September 21, it didn't know, because it wasn't in the data set. And that's really telling thing for all of us, I guess, as we start to think about how we're going to apply this technology, because the provenance and quality and integrity and even just the completeness of the data that you have is really going to be very, very important. And it's really interesting, actually, talking to we're a big bank, we've got lots of people, and one of the things that is really a benefit of that is we've got some deep expertise and some big brains who are thinking about these problems, and making sure that we're starting to think about the life cycle of data right from the point of the origination, right down to the point of how we structure stuff, to make sure that we're getting that clean flow of high integrity, unbiased data to help inform these models. One of the other problems challenges we have is that it's hard for us to participate in the public models Our customers have a very, very high expectation that their data will be protected. That they're, as they should. I certainly do with my bank. That my confidentiality and privacy is protected, and so we can't feeding data and data in all its forms, ranging from customer information, obviously, right through to application code or documentation. I think so. A lot of what we have to do inside our own four walls, where we're having to learn about how to deploy and train these models in a way that protects that sort of sacrosanct requirement for us to protect, preserve, and maintain the integrity of confidentiality and safety and security of customers' data, but also seek to get the benefits of the learning and the technology and the evolution of the models. It's something that certainly we're learning at lightning speed. That there's a lot of work that you have to do about making sure that you go about this in a considered, structured, and rigorous way that sort of deals with our obligations as a trusted organisation, as regulated business, and also as custodians of trust for our customers, to make sure that we're doing it in the right way to maintain our role in that regard.
Right. And, Richard, I mean, it's kind of like the evolution of technology within organizations. I recall like cloud computing and how do you adapt and adopt that within your organization, the public versus private, and kind of going through that process, which raises, security questions and confidentiality and protection of data. So I feel like it's a constant cycle that kind of repeats itself when you look at the evolution of different technology. Richard, let me ask a question. Looking at banking in particular, what guiding principles and policies can be adopted or adapted?
Yeah. So, pleasingly, our regulators are coming to the conversation, and there'll be people who'll talk to you about the constraints of working in a regulated business. But I personally am very respectful of the role that our regulators play, because ultimately they are there to protect the consumer. They're there to protect our customers and to make sure that their money, their data, their privacy, their confidentiality is safe. And a lot of the discussion that is coming from our regulators is ultimately that we always have to keep in mind that these are just computers, right? They're not sentient. They don't have artificial general intelligence. They can't think for themselves. But what they're doing is they're taking massive amount of inputs with massive amount of computing and processing resources, and they're returning modeled results based on algorithms and the data that are fed to them, but they're still, I use the word high-speed morons. They're just doing what we tell them really quickly, and there's no intelligence inside this AI. So what that means is that we need to operate in the context that we can't abrogate any of our responsibility for that confidentiality, for that integrity of the data, for that safety and security to the AI machine. That ultimately, that we are responsible for the outputs of those programs and for the execution on those outputs of those programs. And the lighthearted anecdote I give is that if the regulator rings me up and says, that Anna Frazzetto lady, you lent her $3 billion unsecured, and she's gone, and you don't look like you're going to get that money back, saying that the AI told me to do that is not going to be an acceptable answer to any regulator, right? So we have to understand, and we have to make sure that we're putting the right amount of rigor and governance around this technology to ensure that our obligations to all our stakeholders, to to our customers, to our shareholders, to the markets in which we operate, that we're doing this in a high integrity way that acknowledges that it is a tool to support operations. It is a tool to support personalization. It's a tool to support customer experience, and to I love the phrase that Microsoft came up with, where they started calling this a co-pilot. It's not the person landing a plane. It's the ancillary tools that help that person to do their job better. And so we really have to think about making sure that we have deep understanding of how it works, and then ultimately that the accountability for how this technology works will rest with us. And that's a very healthy conversation, because suddenly when this stuff first came out, there were conversations. Look, we are going to still need people in our business. We can't just have the robots running around, doing all the banking and doing all the decision making and doing all the customer processing. But it's one heck of a tool if done right. If we, and this is where we are having some great success. Helping us with things like knowledge discovery, helping us look for patterns in data that we may not otherwise see, or that we may take longer to see than these new hyper-powered tools can present them to us. But it's still a tool there to help our experts, do the job that they need to do, but maybe taking away some of that toil, that work for marginal value, to allow them to focus on the high value, high value, important actions and activities that they're going to work on.
All right. So, Richard, in case if you're wondering where I am with the $3 billion, I'm in Fiji sipping Mai Tais, just for future reference. Richard, how about, I think this might be a logical next step here, is can you share your top 3 best practices to providing a secure and stable environment?
Yeah, look, going back to the fact that you aged me at the open of this conversation, I started working with internet technologies in 1993, and the very first version of the internet browser that I got my hands on was Mosaic 0.87b. It wasn't even later released to the world as Mosaic version 1, and then very quickly became an application called Netscape, which was really the very first commercial web browsing software. Anybody born after 1995 doesn't even know that existed. But I remember when that technology, and I remember the day I saw the very first web browser. I was in the offices of Netscape in Mountain View, California, and the gentleman that was showing me this exciting new technology, he said, "See this content on the screen in front of me? That content is on that server over there." And that might sound like, what the hell are you talking about? But at its time, that was mind blowing. That I could see and interact with content and programs on a computer that was not the one that I was sitting in front of, and it wasn't a terminal. It was a fully functioning PC, and that I was working on a computer that could be on the other side of the room or the other side of the world. And I came away from that thinking, gee, this stuff is going to change the world. And then reality took over. And I remember Netscape 2. And I remember Netscape 4. I think it was about version 4 when we started to get a little bit of programmability. Certainly we started to be able to format pages so they looked a bit more low formatted documents. And I think maybe it wasn't even 4 when we started to have encrypted browser sessions. And it was a decade before we went from this absolutely mind-blowing, fundamental, paradigm-changing technology in a web browser to it being something that was ready for prime time. And those of us who have a few more miles under our wheels will remember things like the browser compatibility challenges that we all had. That we had to code for different browsers on different operating systems, and it was just clumsy and hard and expensive and things like that. And And I think it's really important that we start to think about this new technology, this generative AI and the large language model technology, a little bit like that. It's another one of those moments where the moment I saw it, I went, wow, this paradigm shifting technology, it's going to change the world. But then you get into the practical day-to-day use of it, and you start to realize that all the features aren't there yet. That there's a lot more for us to learn and to do. And you talk to some of the specialists in the field, and they talk about a hallucination of models and model deterioration over time, because the answers of the model feed into the model itself, and you get all these complexities that mean that we've still got a lot of heavy thinking and a lot of heavy problem solving that we're going to need to be able to do before this thing realizes the full potential of what it's going to be capable of doing. Now, the big difference is that, when we went through the internet, the genesis of the internet, it was really slow because we had dial-up modems. We didn't have broadband. It took 10 or 15 years, because it had to take 10 or 15 years just to get the infrastructure in place and to get the commercials working in a way that the industry could happen. And that's not going to happen in this case. It's going to happen at light speed. And this evolution of the technology that will see these challenges interrogated and understood, and see the innovations and the evolution and the maturation of the technology and tools, it's going to happen in quarters and years rather than years and decades. And so, but the healthy thing, I think, is to realize that we've got a long way to go. We've come an enormous amount of distance, but we've got a long way to go. And the phrase that I use with a lot of my colleagues is hurry up and slow down. Like we have to get our heads around it. We have to understand it. We have to identify what the potential is and start thinking about how to innovate and to use it. But we've got a bit of a way to go on it being to go through the natural maturation cycle that it needs. So what are some good practices? Well, some good practices are to start the conversation about the data. Like data is we used to call it the new oil. I don't know. It's the new hydrogen now, probably a bit more eco-friendly and less polluting. But if you don't have good data, and if you don't have a concept about your data and making sure that it's high integrity, bias free, industrial in its supply, that the constant flow of good data is being fed into your models, then you're going to be playing catch up with the organisations who are already thinking like that. That you need to understand that it's a tool. It's not a magic wand, and so understanding how you can use it to augment your business processes, or in my world, to augment the value we're bringing to our customers, the value that we're bringing to our colleagues, and that needs to be considered, and needs to be considered in a whole. One of the things that I think we identified pretty quickly was that when this stuff first burst onto the scene, lots of islands of innovation. This team wants to do this thing, this team wants to do this thing. And very quickly you understand that, you can't think like that. You've got to start thinking about it as an organization as a whole, and about the customer experience and the customer journey as a whole. Because, innovation at a point is much, much less powerful than innovation in the whole. And so we really started to think, taking a little bit of pause, that slow down portion of the hurry up, is take a bit of pause and think about, well, if I'm going to have this wonderful tool to augment what we do for our customers and our colleagues, then how am I going to implement it in a way that's going to support everything that those customers and colleagues need, and in a way that I can sustain it through good quality data and good quality training and evolution and continued development of the models themselves. Probably a little bit of a rambling rant there, but hopefully I made some sense.
No, it does make sense, Richard. And actually, you referred to, as you were talking about, generative AI. So I guess my last question would be: what are you seeing in that space, and what are some of the top initiatives for generative AI? Without
giving away the competitive crown jewels, some of the places where it's exciting for us is really in terms of knowledge discovery and distillation of massive amounts of information. So you can imagine inside a big bank like us working in as many markets as we do, the complexity of just our policy documentation and practice documentation, procedural documentation is massive. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of pages, and it's organic. It's changing all the time. There's updates to policy notes. There's updates to risk notes. There's market perspectives and all that sort of stuff. And so, our customer-facing colleagues at the front line in a particular market are constantly faced with this challenge of having to navigate back into policy and documentation before they're able to act on a request or a requirement for a customer. And some of that navigation through that documentation is very, very time consuming. Well, now with some of these new tools, we can ingest all of that information and we can help the knowledge discovery that allows the colleague to ask a question of the engine in the context that they are considering and have it return information to help them just reduce the amount of time that it takes to get that information. So instead of having to navigate through an index that says, show me the policy on this class of asset in this market in these conditions, you can ask the question that says, what do I need to know to lend on this here? And suddenly it can go and divine the information or the answers from the massive store of information we have and deliver it back to the colleague with references to where the answer is informed from, etc. And that takes a couple of hours of that toil that I was talking about before out of the process and provides the answer to the colleague in context at the moment while they're working on the thing. And that's really exciting for me. Like that, that's where that co-piloting idea is really is really powerful, where you're actually able to find ways to just bring the tools that our colleagues need at the time that they need it, in the context that they need them, be it data, be it policy, be it information, be it access to a process, be it access to a colleague. To have the machine come and say, well, the person in the bank who has the best knowledge about this thing is Anna. The people who have worked on similar products or opportunities to you are Richard. Just that ability to streamline and get information in context at the time that you need it is really, really exciting. But, it's going to touch everything that we do. It's going to help improve our customer propositions. It's going to help us look at risk. We can manage and monitor our portfolios. It's going to help us distill information and insights from public sources and subscribed sources, and help just streamline that flow of information and I guess automate contextualizing stuff so that we can just get the right information to the people they need in the context that they need at the time that they need it. But it's very, very exciting.
It definitely is.
One of those things where I look at it, this stuff's going to change the world.
Oh, it is. It is. And you know what? It almost feels a little bit as if we haven't even experienced yet the full potential of what could happen. So definitely exciting times. Unfortunately, Richard, it kind of brings us to the end of the podcast. But if I was to ask you, what power word would you want to leave the audience with? What would you leave them with?
Dreadfully paraphrasing Star Trek, go boldly and explore. It's because you're 100% right. You're 100% right, Anna. We're at the start of one of those big bangs, one of those tectonic shifts in the way that we think about technology, and we haven't even thought of problems that we may want to solve or explore or whatever with this technology yet. So, boldly go. Learn how to use it. Think about how it's going to impact what you do every day, what your team does every day, what your customers are going to want from you every day. But just boldly go, I think, is probably the words I would let you with.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Richard.
It's my pleasure, Anna. And let's not leave it for another 5 or 6 years until we catch up again.
Thanks for joining us on the AI to Z podcast with Anna Frizzetto. If you found value in today's episode, consider following for more insightful STEM discussions. We'll be back with another deep dive. Until then.